Hello! Oyama Masutatsu is a legendary figure in the world of martial arts. He founded his school of karate, which was criticized for its brutality, and for a long time was not taken seriously. Many details of the master's life sound more like myths, although some of them have actually been documented. Today's movie will help us learn more about his difficult journey. World War II is coming to an end. For over 40 years, Korea has been under Japan's rule. In a world torn by conflict, a young boy, Choi Bae-dal, has only one dream: to fly with the wind. He wants to become a pilot, but the military uniform turns out to be like a cage for him. The meaning of life is lost, and only the wind can guide Bae-dal to his new dream. A man in white clothes is walking across the field, preparing to find another martial arts master. He's afraid to enter the battle and fears that he will be defeated, but nevertheless, he chooses the warrior's path.
싸우다 죽는 것보다 불구나 패인으로 살아남을까 봐.
There are hundreds of similar fights under his belt, but this one will be special. The opponent truly frightens the master. Once upon a time, Choi Bae-dal was a simple Korean boxer. One day, a Japanese airplane flew over the ring during a fight. It was dropping flyers announcing that they were recruiting pilots to fight in World War II. Choi immediately becomes excited about the idea. At night, he sneaks onto a ship sailing for Japan. After knocking out one of the soldiers, he steals his uniform and changes into it. Once ashore, the man slips into an alley and escapes. He hastily removes his uniform, but is spotted by a stranger. The man knocks Bae-dal to the ground and immediately realizes that the guy is an illegal migrant. He threatens him with jail and orders him to empty his pockets. The boxer also realizes that the man in front of him is not a policeman, but a small-time crook. Bae-dal frees himself with a quick punch and hurries away. The stranger curses in pain, revealing his Korean origin. Choi returns and interrogates Chun-bae, who won't stop lying even after several blows to the face. They're interrupted by soldiers looking for the thief who infiltrated the ship. Choi runs away, and Chun-bae goes off to find a new victim. But soon he runs into his acquaintances, who plan on beating him up to collect a debt. The crook runs away from the angry men and hides in the back of a truck. Bae-dal, who has chosen the same hiding place, shows up from behind a nearby crate. The driver pulls away, taking the fugitives away from danger. The Koreans become acquainted, and Bae-dal shows the guy the flyer. The crook can't understand why his new acquaintance would want to go to war. Choi explains that he doesn't really hold on to life, and being a pilot is his dream. Besides, it's no coincidence that he chose this truck. It's heading right to the aviation school. Chun-bae is not excited about this turn of events and is about to get out.
다친다. 죽는 거보단 100배 낫지, 씨발로마.
The crook lands deftly on his feet, making an obscene gesture in farewell. But a second later, he starts running after the truck again, as the men seeking revenge are still on his tail. Choi helps the arrogant friend climb back inside, and they reach the school. But the fighting in the Pacific has come to an end, and the army has begun to disband. Japan was heavily bombed, and the aviation school was not spared either. The only pilots that are still needed are kamikazes. The Koreans refuse this role. For this, they are tied to poles as easy targets for enemy attacks, along with the rest of the prisoners. Bae-dal and Chun-bae miraculously survive, but they don't have long to live. They're spotted by Warden Kato, who orders to have the prisoners released. He says that becoming a kamikaze is a great honor that the pathetic Koreans are unworthy of. Chun-bae throws off the ropes and starts showering the Japanese with curses. He's about to be punished, but Choi stands up for his friend. The boxer takes down several soldiers before he's threatened with a gun. But the fearless Bae-dal is ready to say goodbye to his life, as long as he doesn't obey the unjust commanders. Kato stops his soldier and praises the fighter's skills. Choi has excellent taekwondo skills, and the warden challenges him to a duel. If the Korean wins, the prisoners will be released. But if he loses, he will die a painful death. Bae-dal agrees and goes up against the karate master. He bravely rushes into the fight, but Kato easily stops all his attacks. The warden grabs his opponent by the throat and topples him to the ground. Choi doesn't plan on giving up. Using a handful of sand, he blinds the Japanese and hits him with a rock. But this only angers his opponent, who responds with a barrage of powerful strikes. Bae-dal lies helplessly on the ground, and Kato brings his samurai sword over his head. Suddenly, another bomb falls on the camp, and Choi attempts to escape. With a swing of his sword, the Japanese man wounds him and shames him for his cowardly behavior.
やはりどうしようもない挑戦人だ。武道をやる資格なぞない。
However, Kato doesn't kill his opponent. The prisoners are also allowed to leave. That same year, Japan capitulated after the attack on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Although Korea gained independence, Bae-dal and Chun-bae remained in the poverty of post-war Tokyo. They began running fraudulent schemes in the local market, luring people to the pachinko gambling machine. Their business is booming, but the local Yakuza mob isn't happy to see Koreans in their territory. Chun-bae doesn't manage to pay them off, and the boss orders to kill the outsider. Choi rushes into the crowd with just his fist to protect his friend. He emerges victorious, but the gang leader pierces his shoulder with a samurai sword. The Japanese threatens to cut off Bae-dal's head, and the guy pisses his pants out of fear. To the laughter of the crowd, he is forced to lick their boots and then loudly announce his new nickname, Bedwetter of Ikebukuro. Choi complies with the humiliating orders to stay alive. Bent down, he runs away in tears into a back alley. Suddenly, a one-armed stranger emerges from the crowd. One of his hands is replaced by an iron hook. The man rebukes the Yakuza for being dishonorable and challenges them to a fight. He bravely fights the bandits with just one hand. After scattering the smaller thugs, he finds himself face to face with their leader. But the police whistle forces them all to put down their blades and disperse. A humiliated Bae-dal watches the battle from around the corner. He recognizes the stranger's face, Bum-soo, his former martial arts teacher. Has stood up for the Koreans' honor. The Korean master, who also happened to be in Japan, takes his battered friends to their fellow countrymen. Many of them make a living as circus performers. The Yakuza are always giving them a hard time. Bum-soo explains that he is helping immigrants. He wants to build a school for Korean children in Tokyo, since they have already started forgetting their native language. Choi begs him to teach him how to fight better, so he can regain his honor. Bum-soo flatly refuses, but Bae-dal doesn't back down and stays under the master's door the whole night. In the pouring rain, he waits for Bum-soo to change his mind. Seeing Bae-dal's persistence, the teacher thinks about the past. He taught the boy, but always mentioned that a clenched fist would not help him make friends or conquer the earth or the skies, and only an open palm would allow one to find happiness. One day, the Japanese came after the master, and Bum-soo could not do anything against their guns. Since then, he has not taken any apprentices. In the morning, Bum-soo walks up to his former student and places training clothes in front of him. The teacher demands that he use his teachings only for self-defense. The master also gives Choi the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. A fighter's main weapon is the mind, and everything else should only be used as a last resort. Later, Bae-dal and his acquaintance are again advertising their slot machine, but now further away from the market. Suddenly, they get hit by a car. The driver jumps out at the men with insults and shoves money into Choi's pocket. Bae-dal pushes the man away and returns the handout. A passenger in the car sides with the Koreans and tells the driver to apologize. It turns out to be Warden Kato, and he and Bae-dal recognize each other. The Japanese man has come to join the Karate Association. He has become its president after the war. He has heard that the vagrant is now known as Bedwetter of Ikebukuro.
子ネズミのごとく命乞いをしたのか。恥知らずなやつめ。
Bae-dal hunches in shame and can't say anything in response. Later, he continues training with Bum-soo. The teacher sees the pain in his student's eyes. He suggests that he not only regain his dignity, but also become the pride of Korea. They spar, after which a smile appears on Bae-dal's face for the first time in a long while. One day, he and Chun-bae notice drunken American soldiers harassing a young Japanese woman. No one dares to interfere, so Bae-dal decides to take action. He goes out to fight against 3 men armed with knives and bottles. The bloodshed is prevented again by the sound of approaching police officers. The Americans flee, and from around the corner comes the resourceful Chun-bae with a whistle. The geisha named Yoko memorizes the name of her savior. Bae-dal also takes a liking to the stranger. Rumors about the brave tiger who saves girls from abusers begin to spread around the city. Upon seeing Yoko, Bae-dal gives her and her friend a ride as a rickshaw driver and overhears their conversation. Although to many, Choi remains the bedwetter of Ikebukuro, to Yoko, he is now the bravest of all men. At night, the Korean continues to protect the Japanese women from harassment, and a bounty is placed on his head. Posters with his face hang all over the neighborhood. To avoid getting caught, the rickshaw driver now always wears a hat that hides his eyes. Yoko recognizes the savior and starts collecting portraits of him in her home. One evening, someone drops several dog tags under her door, plucked from the necks of abusers. Yoko runs out into the street, but Bae-dal is already gone. Once again, while giving a ride to his beloved, he gets caught by the Americans. Yoko finds him unconscious, beaten and wounded, and takes him to her home.
私を助けてくれたのもあなたでしょ、モコ。
They become friends and spend time together. Happy Beidol loses his guard and is found by the one-eyed assistant of Kato. The man takes him to his boss, who doesn't understand why the Korean is helping Japanese women. During the occupation, the Japanese themselves committed many crimes against Korean women, and Beidol is well aware of this. Kato says that he has been practicing karate since his early years, and no one has ever been able to land even one blow on him. The Korean was the first to do so. Kato admits that Beidol possesses the spirit of a fighter.
猛虎なんぞとほざき高貴な武士道精神を汚すな。
He threatens to kill the Korean if he ever sees him again and lets him go. While Beidol is away, the Yakuza raid the circus performers. They disperse the Koreans and destroy their camp. The gangsters come to Bum-Soo's house, demanding that he hand over all the ration cards of the Koreans. The master's been saving them up to exchange them for money and build a school. Bum-Soo rushes into the fight, but gets surrounded on all sides. Beidol doesn't manage to come to his teacher's aid in time, and the man gets fatally wounded with a sword. The Koreans mourn bitterly for their friend and mentor. Later, a furious Beidol leads his countrymen into battle. A street fight with the Yakuza ends disastrously. The Koreans sacrifice themselves to get to the criminal's boss and kill him. The police arrive on the scene, breaking up the fight with assault rifles. A concussed Beidol rises from the ground and looks around. This isn't at all what his dead teacher would have wanted. He soon remembers the book that Bum-Soo gave him.
힘없는 정의는 무능력이고 정의 없는 힘은 폭력일 뿐입니다.
Realizing that he must find a different path, Beidol says goodbye to Yoko and Chunbei. He goes into the mountains, where he becomes a hermit. With him, he takes only a thin tent, a pot, and an old kimono. Every day he puts his body and spirit to new tests. Suffering from cold and hunger, he continues his grueling training. The man sees no results and demands too much of himself too quickly. By doing so, Beidol only brings himself to a nervous breakdown. In the middle of the night, he tears off his clothes and runs through the forest, fighting off non-existent enemies. But in the morning, the man gathers his courage and pulls himself together. He curbs his emotions and starts training again. The heavy timbers prepare him to withstand all blows, and his legs and arms become insensitive to the cold. His muscles become accustomed to heavy exertion, and his fears recede. Beidol breaks rocks and tree trunks with his bare hands. Miyamoto Musashi and his Book of Five Rings become the hermit's only companions. All the warrior's goals are accomplished here, and the time comes for new trials. He descends from the mountains and arrives in a city. There, the man comes to one of the karate schools that belongs to the Kato's association. The long hair and tattered clothes of the vagrant don't arouse anyone's respect. But Beidol only politely asks permission to show off his skills and fight one of their karate masters. Master Satani says they're not supposed to fight strangers to avoid accidentally crippling them. The Korean insists, saying he's willing to risk his life. He himself suggests that his opponents wear protection before the fight.
池袋の小便漏らしの分際で道場荒らしに来るとは。
This time, Beidol is not the least bit embarrassed and calmly repeats his request. The school's top student thinks he can easily take down the vagrant, but he's knocked out with just one powerful punch. One by one, the students come out to fight against the insolent man. With each fallen student, the determination of the next one fades. The last of his opponents are no longer above wearing their protective plates. Finally, it's Satani's turn. He refuses to wear protection, and he and Beidol begin to test each other's strength. Soon the master falls and is unable to get up. The Korean doesn't seem to even feel any pain. Beidol continues to travel all over Japan, challenging the most famous martial artists. News is spreading across the country, and journalists are picking up the incredible story. Beidol is now called by the Japanese name Oyama Masutatsu and is being compared to Miyamoto Musashi himself. Kato recognizes a familiar face in the newspapers and becomes furious. With each new victory, more and more journalists follow Beidol with cameras. The news reaches Yoko, who follows her beloved's journey with excitement. Beidol continues his travels, defeating masters of all styles. For many of them, this becomes an intolerable humiliation, and they close their schools. The masters report their defeats to Kato, who can no longer ignore the undefeated Korean. Meanwhile, barefoot Beidol continues his training and avoids the annoying reporters. He arrives at a castle where he prepares to fight a ninjutsu master, but the fighter, who specializes in stealth, doesn't let him prepare, and suddenly attacks him from around the corner. He skillfully uses his surroundings to take Bae-dol by surprise and deprive him of his comfortable fighting conditions. But even then, the Korean man manages to outmaneuver his opponent, whom he pushes into the water. Both masters fly down the fortress wall. Journalists begin to fear that they both have drowned. But Choi is the first to surface from the river, dragging the defeated ninja with him. Kato's one-eyed assistant also witnesses the battle. Bae-dol finally returns to Yoko. They embrace warmly, and the girl prepares a bath for her guest. She sees the countless scratches and scars on his body and doesn't understand the man's choice.
痛いのにどうして
Bae-dol doesn't have an answer, but he has no intention of straying from his path. Even a sweet kiss doesn't stop him from embarking on a new journey. The man leaves the sad Yoko behind and sets out to meet new opponents. The next 3 bouts turn out to be very challenging, but in the end, the masters of Aikido, Judo, and Kendo are defeated. Now Bae-dol has defeated everyone who has accepted his challenge and has become famous throughout Japan. The only one who can defend the country's honor now is Kato himself. He holds a press conference where he answers reporters' questions about the invincible Korean. But instead of going out to fight him, Kato declares that Bae-dol is a disgrace to karate. His style is ugly and rubbish, and a real karate fighter has to follow a particular etiquette. Therefore, the man is not worthy of a fight. The influential people from the association are just going to get rid of the annoying Korean. Meanwhile, Bae-dol, Yoko, and Chunbei enjoy each other's company on the streets of Tokyo. The fighter is surrounded by people wanting an autograph, and an assassin armed with a knife enters the crowd. He plunges the blade into the man's stomach and walks away unnoticed. At Yoko's house, a doctor rescues Bae-dol from death. Chunbei tries to support his friend as best he can. He offers to find another fighter so Choi can train him and let him fight in his place.
수입은 8대 2대 2. 4, 2, 2.
Yoko kicks Chunbei out so that he won't disturb Bae-dol's recovery with his crazy ideas. All the while, she is not allowed to keep a man in her house, or the geisha's master will throw her out on the street. Bae-dol receives a message from Ryoma, Kato's one-eyed henchman, who summons him to another fight. The envelope also contains a short battle blade. Bae-dol admits to Yoko that he thinks a lot about death. He always washes himself and his clothes before a fight, so he won't look too bad if he dies. But now the man is afraid of something else. The last thing he'd want to do is lose Yoko. The thought of never seeing her again drives the man into a true terror. With tears in her eyes, Yoko finally hears the word she has been waiting for so long. At this moment, she is summoned to work, and the geisha must leave. But the girl doesn't want to leave her beloved alone. She is even ready to stop being a geisha, but in that case, Bae-dol must promise not to fight anymore. The man agrees, and Yoko stays with him. They spend the night together. Bae-dol has ignored Ryoma's challenge, and this offends the fighter. He finds Chunbei, destroys his slot machines, and beats him severely. Choi finds his friend, his arm pinned with a knife. The attacker threatens that if Bae-dol doesn't accept the challenge, Yoko will be his next victim. Breaking his promise, the still wounded fighter meets Ryoma at an abandoned temple. He didn't bring his katana with him, though his opponent intends to cut him in half. Bae-dol gets wounded again and stops Ryoma's sword with his bare hands. His shoulder gets pierced through, but with his other hand, Bae-dol manages to deliver a fatal blow to Ryoma's heart. Both opponents fall, and the Korean regains consciousness in the morning. He checks on Ryoma, shocked to find him not breathing. The police find them, and Bae-dol ends up in jail for the murder he committed. Yoko comes to the station.
大山は会わないそうです。
待っていると伝えていただけませんか
The girl waits the whole day, but doesn't get a chance to see her lover. Instead, it's Kato who visits Bae-dol and finally challenges him to a deadly battle. Choi cries out in despair that he will never fight again. He has already broken his promise and killed a man in fear, having forever lost Yoko's love. Kato lets the offer stand, saying that Bae-dol has a chance to prove to the Japanese that Koreans are worth something. Immediately after he leaves, the prisoner is released from custody. He was acquitted due to it being obvious self-defense. Choi leaves the police station with Chunbei and looks for Yoko with his eyes. The girl doesn't get out of the car and drives away. Ryoma's funeral is being held at the Karate Association. Kato swears that he will kill the culprits in front of the whole of Japan. Bae-dol also learns that Ryoma had a wife and a young son. He goes to their house and falls to his knees. He gives the woman his kimono and asks her to give him any housework so he can atone for his sins. In response, she pours dirty liquid on his face, but the man remains undeterred. Eventually, the woman takes him in and houses him in the barn. Ryoma's son, Tomoya, is now being bullied at school.
父ちゃんのいねえお前に何ができんだよ。お前あの山の
The boys brag that their fathers took them to the top of the nearest mountain and taught Tomoya that he has no one to go there with. Beidol notices this and drives the bullies away, but the boy is still angry with them and sees the man as the cause of all his misfortunes. The next morning, Beidol waits for the kid to come out of the house and puts him behind his back. He carries Tomoya up the mountain, despite the cuts from branches and hunger. He and the boy become friends after all, and the man begins to take care of him. One day, the man is visited by Chunbei, who brings unpleasant news. The newspapers say that Beidol has dishonored Ryoma's wife. The friend tries to convince him to return, but the fighter still doesn't want to fight. However, in the evening, Ryoma's wife comes to his barn and returns Beidol's kimono to him. She too has read the papers and asks him to defend his honor. He must become the best in Japan to be a role model for her son. Beidol leaves the statue of Musashi Miyamatsu to Tomoya and sets off. He puts on his kimono again and walks out into the field. Dozens of Kato's students pounce on him, trying to break him down even before the main fight. Despite the strikes he receives, Beidol advances. The ground becomes strewn with defeated enemies. Guards with swords come forward, protecting Kato. The master stops them and steps into the center. He asks the Korean if he has taken too much upon himself.
貴様超えるべき山の一つに過ぎん
The fighters engage in a duel. Beidol gets kicked in the head, followed by a couple more strikes to the body. His confidence seems to be shaken, while Kato seems unfazed. However, Beidol has been through too much to give up now. He shifts his focus, turning his body into an impenetrable wall. The Korean moves forward in spite of his opponent's blows. In a high jump, he performs a tornado kick, knocking Kato to the ground. His opponent gets up, attempting a jumping attack. Beidol stops him and breaks his leg with a powerful kick. Kato can't lean on his aching limb and is vulnerable to strikes. Beidol throws a fist straight for the man's head, but stops his hand an inch away from his defenseless opponent. He doesn't want to repeat the same mistake that led to Ryoma's death. His work is done now. Kato has been defeated. The guards run up to their boss, but Kato orders them to put their swords away. The Japanese lowers his head, accepting defeat with dignity. The others join him and show respect for the stronger fighter. Beidol has finally proven his superiority, but the master's path doesn't end there, and he will continue to look for a stronger opponent. For Beidol, this turns out to be a wild bull, which he takes on with his bare hands. This movie is partly based on the biography of a real person. Choi Beidol is the founder of the Kyokushin style of karate. He is more commonly known by his Japanese name, Masutatsu Oyama, which translates to, he who multiplies his achievements akin to a high mountain. He really did step into the arena to fight against bulls. The boy was born into a family of Korean nobles in 1923. At the age of 15, he went to Japan, where he became one of the first Japanese military pilots of Korean descent. During his period of seclusion, he lived in the hut he had built with his own hands for a total of 32 months. During this time, he practiced cutting the trunks and branches of pine trees with his palms, and endured several fights with wild beasts. He died in 1994. As always, look for the title of the movie in the description of the video. In the meantime, let us know in the comments, what are you willing to sacrifice to become a master of your craft? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, so that more awesome stories are released as often as possible.